Hi, boys and girls. Miss Tatsky here. Today, we're going to go into learning about shapes. Now, many of you are like, Miss Tatsky, I know all about shapes. However, boys and girls, we're going to have to know a little bit more about squares, rectangles. Today, we're going to have to learn how we know a square is a square, why a rectangle is a rectangle. Okay, so today, our lesson, hopefully, you will be able to say, I can tell the difference between defining and non defining attributes of squares and other rectangles. So that's a lot. There's a lot of big words in there. So you're going to be able to say, boys and girls, I know this is a square because, and you're going to tell me why. And there's key parts that make a square and a rectangle a rectangle. Let's learn about them now. So first off, rectangles and squares are two-dimensional shapes. Let's think right now. I want you to think of other two-dimensional shapes. What are some other two-dimensional shapes you already know? If you want, right now you can pause Miss Tatsky's video, go get a piece of paper, and draw as many two-dimensional shapes as you can. Awesome. Boys and girls, you came up with some great two-dimensional shapes. We've got squares, rectangles, circles, triangles, hexagons. Ooh, we've got some good ones. Nice job. We're going to talk today specifically about rectangles and squares. I want you to look at these shapes. All of those shapes have the same number of sides and corners. So for example, let's count this purple one right up here. Let's count this. We've got one side. We've got two sides. We have three sides. And we have four sides. Now let's count the corners. We've got one corner. We've got two corners. We have three corners. And we have four corners. So boys and girls, we know that all rectangles and all squares have four corners. I want to tell you something else about rectangles and squares. Miss Tatsky's got this little L shape here. If I put that L shape right in the corner, we call that a square corner because it goes straight up and straight down. Some of you might be able to do that with your arm, right? If we put it straight out and straight up, we have a right angle or a square corner. If you look at a piece of paper, without it being ripped, has square corners. For a rectangle to be a rectangle or a square to be a square, it must be a closed figure. That means there are no gaps. If you look at the top shape here, that is not a rectangle, boys and girls, because there's a hole in it, right? There's a gap. So we would call any shape with an opening, we'd call that an open figure. And if it is all the way enclosed, we would call that a closed figure. Squares. So right here, Miss Tatsky has this orange square and a purple square. Squares are special rectangles. What is so special about squares, you might wonder? Well, just like rectangles, they have 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. They have 1, 2, 3, 4 corners. But squares, boys and girls, they're special rectangles because all four sides are the same. They're the same length. So a square is a rectangle. A square is a special rectangle with four sides all being the same length. And we can call a square a square. We can call it a square rectangle, or we can just call it a rectangle. That's what makes squares special rectangles. Well, let's look at a rectangle then. For a rectangle to be a rectangle, it has to be closed. So it has to be a closed shape. That means all the way around, boys and girls, we have to have no openings. For a rectangle to be a rectangle, it has to have four sides. However, rectangles, the four sides, the opposite. So if we have top and bottom, they're going to be the same length. The two sides, right and left, they're going to be the same length. So for a rectangle to be a rectangle, it has four sides, but maybe the top and bottom are the same side, and the sides are the same size. Squares are rectangles because that still happens. A top and bottom of the square, they're the same size, aren't they? And the side and the other side of a square, they're the same size. And the last part that you have to know is that all rectangles, for a shape to be a rectangle, it has to have four corners. Four corners. Let's look at these shapes here in the box. We want to decide, are they rectangles or not? Let's start right here with the red one. Is that a rectangle? Oh, you're right. Boys and girls, that is a rectangle. But that is our special rectangle. What do we call a rectangle where all four sides are the same? Awesome, boys and girls. It is a square. You're right. So can we call it a square? Absolutely. Can we call it a rectangle? You bet. So the red one's a rectangle. Oh, you're right. The one right next to it is a rectangle. How about the orange one? Is the orange one a rectangle? You've got it. It is. It's another special rectangle, isn't it? Called a square. How about this long thing right here, this blue one that's on its side? Is that a rectangle? You're right. It's a rectangle too. It doesn't matter, boys and girls, if it's straight up and down or straight across. It can be at a diagonal. How about this white figure here, this white one that's standing on its point? Is that a rectangle? Be careful, boys and girls. It is a rectangle. If we would turn that onto its side, look. Now it is a special rectangle. It's a square. Again, boys and girls, just like the blue, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's sitting flat on a side or if it's on a point or a corner, okay? As long as the four sides are enclosed, that means there's four corners, and for a rectangle to be a rectangle, two sides. So for example, right here, we've got this one side here and this side here. Are they the same length? You're right. How about here? Is this side and this side the same length? You're right. So as long as it has two sides across from each other that are the same length, it is a rectangle. Oh, puzzled penguin. He wants to know if he is correct. He says that this first shape here, A, he says that is a rectangle. Is he correct? No, he's not correct. Is he? What is his mistake? What did he do wrong? That's right, boys and girls, if you look here, that shape is not closed, is it? There's a gap there. Remember, for a rectangle to be a rectangle, it has to have no gaps. It has to be closed. All right, Puzzled Penguin says that shape B, so the red shape, is a square because it is red. Is he correct? It is a square, you're right, but is it a square because it's red? No, it's a square because all 4 sides are the same length. All right, Puzzled Penguin says that shape C is not a rectangle because it is sitting on its point. So it's sitting right here on that point. Is he correct? You're right. Puzzled Penguin, we know that it doesn't matter how the rectangle is sitting. It can be flat on a side. It can be sitting on that corner. A rectangle is a rectangle no matter what way it is facing or which direction it is laying. Excellent. How can we help Puzzled Penguin to know what makes a shape a square or a rectangle? But remember, boys and girls, not all rectangles are squares, right? So, for example, this B here, this red square, that is a square. This is a square because all 4 sides are the same length. Is C a square? No, a C here cannot be a square. C is a rectangle and only a rectangle. All right, let's look at these shapes here. Let's put an X. Let's draw an X or cross them off if it is not a rectangle. So let's start here. Is the orange one a rectangle? You're right, it is. It's a special rectangle called a square. How about the green one sitting on its point? Is that a rectangle? You're right. It's a square. Squares are rectangles. Ooh, how about this next one? You're right, boys and girls. That is not a square. We've got a gap here. No gaps, right? We can't have gaps. How about this other white shape? Is that a rectangle? You're right, it's a rectangle, so we're going to leave it. How about this shape? Looks like a stop sign. You're right, not a rectangle. The blue one? Yeah, that's a rectangle. Ooh, how about this bottom one that's orange? Not a rectangle. Do you know what that's called? You're right, that's a triangle, boys and girls. And how about this last one, the red one? Is that a rectangle? You've got it. Awesome job, friends. Today, I want you to think. Maybe pause the video, okay? I want you to draw a shape that has 4 sides and 4 corners. Go ahead and do that now. Awesome. Some of you drew rectangles, some of you drew squares, didn't you? How about this time? I want you to draw a shape that has 4 sides, but they're all the same length. And the same shape has to have 4 square corners. Go ahead, pause the video, and let's draw that shape too. Great job, friends. That shape can only be a square because it has the same length of sides, right? Excellent. Today, you're going to complete the worksheet. Okay, complete the worksheet, follow the directions. After that worksheet, you might have seen a paper that looks like this, boys and girls. It just talks to you about what a rectangle is. So that's for you to keep. Then we have two different bunny shape worksheets, two of them. The first one says color all the squares blue. So you're going to find all the squares here and color them blue. And the other sheet says color all the rectangles orange. All right. After that, you have one more worksheet. This worksheet is a sort. So you're going to have to cut out those shapes on the bottom and paste them in the right column. If it's a square, it's going to go in the first column. If it's a rectangle, and if it's not a square or a rectangle, I want you to put it over here in the column that says not squares and not rectangles. The last thing Ms. Totsky gave you for your work today is kind of a little packet. It looks like this. That's the first sheet. The last sheet, boys and girls, looks like this. This sheet is where you write all your answers. All right? This sheet, you're going to go through, and in the corner, so for example, right here, it says number 1. You're going to read the question and then find number 1 on your recording sheet and write your answer. This, boys and girls, you can do if you want. You do not have to. Okay, that is your choice. And then the last thing you're going to do today is you're going to continue to practice your math facts. All right? Well, you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow.